Yeah, alright. I'm Jack, the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. And don't forget that if you leave a review for the Threshold I've commented onto the pinned post on my Facebook page, then you could easily win yourself a free mystery box. But self-love, that's still important, so maybe you should treat yourself to a Go Fuck Yourself box from my website, www.worldaroundyou.com. Because Christmas ain't all that far away, and now, I know what you're thinking. Pretty fucking bold to start off with a show in September with talk of Christmas, but I hope it all kind of makes sense by the end, and there's a good chance it probably won't, because this is a weird topic. This now, I did intend to look into this topic properly and thoroughly research it, but I've intended to do that on the other shows, and it never really happens. But I really did try this time. But I ended up going down quite a few different holes, as you're gonna see now as I go through my research with you. So this week, what I was looking into this thing called the Majestic 12. Fucking, shock horror, more alien talk. But the Majestic 12 is one of the closest things that we get, I think, to a fresh myth. A fresh myth in the sense of it being within the past 100 years. I know that there's Bigfoot myths and other cryptozoological myths, but there's always been talk of massive monsters throughout history with dragons and the Kraken and all that, so this is a myth set in science fiction universe. In our universe, the Majestic 12 is supposedly just a cover name, a pseudonym, a code name, all supposedly starting back in 1947 with the Roswell incident. Now, for those that don't know, the Roswell incident is a supposed first contact with aliens when a spaceship crashed into the Earth. I've often wondered if it was actually a time traveller, like John Titor or Tito, or however you say it, or even a part of the ship from that Philadelphia experiment. Even though that particular experiment was supposed to be a field test of a cloaking device, it allegedly resulted in sending at least a couple of people through time and space, whilst also melting some other folk into the framework of the boat itself. So, what if a time traveller or a trainee time traveller got sent back in time, but they got the coordinates wrong, maybe even just slightly wrong, or whatever the data would be? I don't know if it would be coordinates if you're going through time and space. If you're going through space, then yeah, coordinates make sense, but don't really know how the time would work, because surely as the universe expands and time changes, doesn't it? Because they say if you was to look back in a straight line, or if they was to look back at the Earth from so far away, you'd still see dinosaurs and that sort. Don't know how you would do the coordinates for time travel. That's, probably that's not the only thing people can't work out with time travel, innit? I'm not trying to say that I've mastered it and I've worked the rest of it out. Anyway, yeah, let's call it time travel. Potentially they were time travelers, and that could have resulted in what looks like a crash, whereas in reality the quote-unquote craft just spawned in 1947, half stuck in the ground, like melted to the floor, and that caused the vessel itself to explode like a crash. But that's just a personal theory, and we're going to try and keep this episode within the realms of reality this time, because last week with the shrimp stuff, I think it got a bit much, didn't it? It was a bit more, just mostly conjecture. It's worth saying straight away and all that the FBI have come out and said that the documents surrounding the Majestic 12 aren't real, but that could also be a lie, couldn't it? Be a double bluff. How are we supposed to know? So who do we believe? Well, I think that there is some weight behind the Majestic 12. Whether or not they are real or actually do what ufologists believe they do is obviously open to debate. And I don't know if I'll get into that, but I reckon they're real to some degree in the sense that everyone throughout history seems to have put a lot of weight behind groups of 12 people, and it's a number that seems to be important to most cultures. The 12 that everyone will know is the 12 months of the year. That's January, February. I'm not your time months. uh, we're led to believe that way because of the solar cycles, the amount of times the sun rises and sets. But supposedly though, these months are actually based off of lunar cycles, and this is where the first link appears. I think here might be a good point to spark up, if you're so inclined, because this is going to be one of them episodes where I'm hoping it's going to get in your head and you'll be like, oh, I didn't know that, So here's a tune with Raekwon and Eric Sermon on it. It's My Style. And that was My Style. What I want to know is, that if the main man behind the Kodak company, George Eastman, is he involved or was he involved with the Majestic 12? Because he proposed a 13-month calendar that was also known as the International Fixed Calendar. 13 months of 28 days, which would mean every day was the same every year. So if the 5th of June was a Thursday, then it would always be a Thursday. Now, think about how easy that would be to live your life by. It's pretty useful, isn't it? It'd be good for building a routine in people as well. And a little aside, but what's proper mental and genuinely true is Mr. Eastman managed to use this calendar to run his business, the film and camera manufacturers, Kodak, which I don't understand how, because if he was using a diary or a planner, and it is, June the 5th was on a Thursday, because it was always on a Thursday, and everyone else's June the 5th that year was actually on a Tuesday. How the fuck how did he plan anything? How was it a successful business? But he managed it, he did it for 61 years, and this mentalist made all of his administrative staff have migraines from the stress of living in 2 separate time zones in their own homes. And that tyrannical Time Lord, he died in 1932, so that's a good few years before Roswell and before the formation of the Majestic 12, but his business only stopped doing the old 13-month calendar thing in 1989, and he died by gunshot. A lot of people that seem to be involved, even loosely, with anything I seem to look into, seem to somehow die of suicidal gunshots. And after looking at his wiki page and as in staring at the top few paragraphs for a few seconds, I don't know if it was actually suicide or if it wasn't suicide, Anyway, I got pretty off track there immediately, so kind of, but not properly. The point I wanted to make was that we have 12 months, yet Georgie Boy managed to squeeze 13 months in. Something that is referenced in an episode of The Simpsons. I think it was a Treehouse of Horror, with the month Smarch. It's on a calendar when they go to the school. Homer calls it lousy Smarch. Or I think and then he turns the heat up because it's cold, which leads to Groundskeeper Willie becoming a Freddy Krueger ripoff. And with it being cold in this skit on The Simpsons, it's safe to assume it's winter time around that time. Could even be close to Christmas. And that's where things get weirder. And it's also why I mentioned Christmas at the top of the show. In that song, The 12 Days of Christmas, have you ever counted how many gifts there are? So you got the partridge in a pear tree, but you get that 12 times. Then you've got, I don't know, what you get 5 gold rings 7 times, and whatever else, you got Lords of Leaping, so you get some slaves, you get some female slaves in the way of milkers. I've always assumed the milkers would be women, but that's just because they're called milkers, and that's what you call a big pair of boobs in it. I mean, obviously not to the woman's face, because it's not going to be a turn on for her if you're like, oh, you've got some fucking lovely milkers, love. She's not going to be into it, is she? But you can call big boobs milkers. Anyway, so you get however many milkers. Well, you'd probably get double the amount of milkers, wouldn't you, if all the milkers were women? Because then, you'd get double the amount of milkers because the amount less work, because everyone's got, well, I would assume the majority of people have 2 breasts, and then you've got actually another one, so it's times 3 the amount of milkers, but not including boobs, not including nipples, just the gifts themselves, including the slaves, the animals, the jewelry, everything, You add them up, anyway, I've added them all up, you get 364. Now that's weird, isn't it? Because that's a gift for every day of the year. And even weirder is that singing and festivities have always been encouraged through winter. Is it to ward off of some evil spirits or something, like the demonic entity that Groundskeeper Willie becomes in that episode of The Simpsons? Just to pickle your minds a little more, there's 52 weeks in both a 364-day year and in the 365 and a quarter day year, and even there's 52 weeks in the 366-day year, leap year, but only the 364-day year is perfectly divisible into 52 separate weeks, so you don't get a year sharing a week. Well, 2 years sharing a week, like it's 2020, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but from Thursday onwards it's 2021. I think it's safe to assume that if the Majestic 12 do exist, that they're the equivalent of a board of governors, and that they must have a leader, someone to report to. Maybe not, but think about it though. Maybe there's a chance that the whole Majestic 12 name is there to throw us off. That way, when they book hotel rooms for 13 people, they won't draw attention to themselves. Whereas a clued up person might ask questions about a dozen people trying to rent hotel rooms together and all attending a meeting in the boardroom or whatever of the same hotel. Although that seems pretty lazy for a secret organisation to be doing it like that. Surely they just book a load of hotel rooms and only use 13 or even use 6. Maybe they all fuck each other. We'll never know. What if there is actually 13 of them? The Majestic 13. The Majestic 13 don't really work, but you'd want something maybe more sinister, wouldn't you, for the number 13? And maybe that's a little psyops as well, but maybe that's why 13 is unlucky. Maybe that's why there's a specific name for the fear of the number 13, which is triskaidekakophobia, I think. You know, it's easy for me to say. It's suspicious as well, though, that triskaidekaphobia. It's just very suspicious that it almost has the word kaleidoscope in there, innit? Almost like the number 13 alters reality, like a kaleidoscope would. Maybe that's what the actual fear itself is, the fear of multiple realities, the fear of 13, triskaidekakophobia. Still don't know how to say it, innit? I've tried it a few times, but maybe that isn't actually the fear of 13. Maybe that's a lie as well. And maybe the fear of 13 actually just means the fear of multiple realities. Maybe all these realities have to be perfectly balanced in order for them to all exist. Maybe the Majestic 13 are actually 13 sentient creatures, maybe one from each reality. Perhaps these alternative realities is why we've got stories of like vampires and werewolves. Maybe in their realities it wasn't apes that got interfered with by the godlike creatures of, say, Planet X, or that evolved into a humanoid. Maybe in one reality bats became the dominant species, whilst in the other it was canines that grew to become the most dominant species, which led to like a werewolf, what we would describe as a werewolf and vampire, you know. Foxes even. Foxes seem to be all over the world, so it could be foxes that became dominant in that, and that's why there's so many foxes and why there's so many bats. We're all allowed, and maybe there's a world full of monkeys somewhere, or apes. Apes are everywhere, like bats are and foxes are over there, you know. And that's just in case we fuck up our reality. We can go over there and inject these apes and become humans again. The foxes, they're all over the world, so why wouldn't they go on to evolve into like a furry's wet dream in some alternative reality? And speaking of foxes, it turns out there are so-called 12 true species of fox. Now that's weird, isn't it? Because it doesn't mean there's 12 species of fox, but 12 true species of fox. Probably just a coincidence, though, the fox thing, isn't it? Anyway, so what if all these realities are like a stack of paper, and they all run the risk of the interdimensional link, we'll call it. Interdimensional link, we'll call it that. We'll call life in these different dimensions interdimensional link. But life itself, whatever it is that makes things experience space and time like we all do, what if that quote-unquote ink can leak through the pages? And that means that vampires, werewolves, mermaids, Sasquatches, I don't know, aliens, you know, all of that side of stuff, ghost stuff. What if they can all appear in our reality and we can also appear in theirs? Imagine the nightmarish tales in a mermaid world of the scaleless, tailless merfolk that kept dying in their wet world, just all these ape creatures just appearing like bald apes, just drowning in the sea around them. It'd be terrifying, wouldn't it, as a mermaid? Because you'd be like, fucking, what's going on here? You know, like, they can't speak. They've gone, these bald blue apes. Would they even have, well, they would have apes, wouldn't they, in the mer world? Because I've just said that before, that they'd have bats and everything, every one of them, just in case they can inject the DNA into them. Or the jokes, you know, think about the jokes that wolfmen would make to each other about the hairless ape men, and how the friend's child might be one who, you know, just teasing each other. Like we'd take the piss out of someone if they had a particularly ugly, hairy child. We'd be like, fucking hell, was the dad a werewolf? Was the mum a werewolf? You know, or did you not think to trim your pubes before you pushed it out because you've got some stuck on him there? They might say the same things, but to do with bald apes, because that's what we are. We're bald apes, aren't we? Maybe they use ape men in these other worlds, some form of slur. I love the idea that there's a universe of Tigbiddy Daves, mate, just saggy-breasted, bald apes that all look identical, and they're all kind of weird, kind of mean, kind of depressed, kind of creepy. Just the true hive mind, mate, the Tigbiddy Dave hive mind. Maybe that's who's trying to take control and make us all think the same way. It's Tigbiddy Dave, guys. I imagine them to be quite timid, though, when they're in our universe, and the Tigbiddy Daves, that is, they would be quite nervous in our universe, I think, and who wouldn't be nervous in a new environment? The 13 members of the Majestic 12 might be 13, but they keep one hidden. Maybe they're a family of all these, you know, these all powerful beings, omnipotent, omniscient, whatever, you know, word you want to throw at them, omni something, with powers beyond our reasoning or imaginations. For example, number 3 can make sealed tins of, you know, anything appear in the flick of an eye. Beans, beans with sausage, spaghetti hoops, soup of any flavour, even the flavours that they don't make anymore, old sauces, old condiments like special edition sauces, anything. He can make tins of anything appear, tins of coins, tins of stones, anything. As long as he can put it in a tin, it'll fit in a tin. Maybe number 3 has the power to make them manifest in our reality with the flick of the eye. Number eight might be able to teleport, but instead of them actually teleporting, they just move the whole world around them, and it's them that stay still. Or maybe number 2 can speak to machines, but not in a way like that little kid in Heroes could in the original series of Heroes, where we had the one with the mum who was a brozzy or a stripper or something. Not like him, but just actually have conversations with them, not make them do his will, and he can only speak to machines, and that's why machines are becoming so prevalent now in our society. Not endless possibilities. I mean, you've got 13 options really, but I mean, between them, they could probably cover all bases. Anyway, tell me your ideas, man. Find me on Twitter, innit, at World Around You, and tweet us what weird superpower do you reckon some of the Majestic 13 might have. These 13 all powerful entities, though, they're bound to have a weak link in it. They're bound to. So why wouldn't these creatures? Perhaps number 13 is really conscientious, and that's kind of their superpower, sort of humanity. It could be something from our reality is number 13, and maybe the Majestic 13 exists in every reality, but the numbers change. The powers don't change, but the number structure changes. So number 13 could be the least important in that reality because it's their reality. So they can't have an influence over it, but they need to help in all of the others and keep the balance in throughout all of the different the pack of paper multi-dimensional reality that exists around us, But maybe number 13, maybe he's let's go with him. He's just conscientious, though. He's not like the least important member. Maybe he spends the entire of his eternity just worrying about his actions or her actions. That's it. That's what they do. They just worry you. This would infuriate the other 12 because they'd never be able to get anything done if 13's always having a whinge in the corner going, oh my God, I can't. Anyway, the other 12 would get really irritated by this, wouldn't they? Like, I can imagine I'd get really irritated if I had someone in a meeting, in a committee meeting, who was always whinging about something. So they lock him away in a prison, mate. The moon. They've locked him in the moon, and maybe that's what's in the moon. Or perhaps number 13 is got to be delicate. Maybe the imaginary sort of mythological creature that is number 13, who is part of the Majestic 13. Maybe this all-powerful, all-knowing, unimaginable being that is number 13 is actually mentally challenged, or the equivalent of mentally challenged compared to the other 12. And like the rulers of olden and modern times alike, I'm pretty sure that, royal families probably still do it. They locked away the sort of the mentally challenged family members, don't they? I'm trying to be as nice as possible here, but the ones that could pull a thread, the ones that would be the thread to pull, if you like, by their enemies. So they locked him away in like a tower in the equivalent of the interdimensional tower. It's like Rapunzel, but they've not got any hair because these are bald apes, let's say. Anyway, this could lead to resentment in number 13, so they use all of their powers, their mind-bending powers, to trickle little bits of information to the masses of Earth through muses, artists, the news, TV, that voice in your head that don't really stop talking to you, it tells you to do stuff. Like him, he probably number 13 probably speaks a lot to that voice in your head that tells you to do things. I reckon that's probably one of his main sources of getting out. But because he's a little bit mentally challenged, he doesn't know that that's not a reliable source of information, is it? If someone says, how do you know that the Majestic 12 aren't the Majestic 13? And you say to them, the little voice in my head, he told me that they've all got superpowers and that some of them are actually mermaids and some of them were. The doctors or whoever the scientist just going to roll their eyes and go, for fuck's sake, he's mental. But the links are tenuous anyway. The links are tenuous and they're hard to pick out unless you look for them, from the drip-fed information that number 13's left you. Because he's, as I say, he's mentally challenged, so he's struggling to make a cohesive story to be able to help us out. Think about it though, the group that stands out the most of 13, where 12 of them are the same and one of them is different, like what I've just said there, they've got the Majestic 12 plus 1. who's not quite the same as the rest. It's Jesus, mate. Jesus and his boys. Now, it depends who you listen to, innit? But Jesus also used to knock about with some woman called Mary Magdalene. Now, she may or may not have been involved in prostitution, but, you know, we're not going to go looking to air her dirty laundry. She died 2,000 years ago. It don't really matter if she was, you know, sucking Jesus' dick, does it really? His little pizzle. Why does that matter? Why does it matter whose mouth Jesus was using for relieving himself in? If he even did, he might have just hung around with you. Could have been Mary Magdalene's pimp. Jesus really could have been the pimp to all 12 disciples and Mary Magdalene. Maybe, you know, because back then I think the ancient Greeks and that they were fine with women having sex with each other, men having sex with, as we touched on last week towards the end, where I was talking about skin bags full of dead shrimp and that, and then they were having sex with them, weren't they, in ancient Greece? So anyway, it depends who you listen to, but I just think it's worth noting that if Jesus was hanging around with all these different types of people, and if he was an alien, it's worth recognising just how inclusive Jesus was as a creature. Though I suppose in the same way an alien wouldn't be fussed about the race, colour, size or gender of a human. It's only the same way a human isn't concerned about any descriptive features of like a cat or a hamster. You know, people say they're not racist and that, but they are. People care if people are fat. People care if other people or themselves are disabled. People care if people are ginger or if they've got freckles, mate. But no one cares about cats or hamsters, innit? You buy an hamster, you've just bought an hamster. Maybe you'll pick one because it looks a little bit better to you than the others, but an hamster's an hamster just in the same way a cat's a cat, innit? Who gives a shit? And maybe that's how Jesus looked at us all. If he was an alien, maybe he was like, fucking hell, you know what, I'm just going to try and collect as many different ones as I can. Now I've got ones with penises, ones with vaginas, I've got a few here with breasts. Tigbiddy Dave's always been travelling through these different dimensions, innit? So he probably did have a Tigbiddy Dave. Good chance that Tigbiddy Dave was actually Judas, and that's why he didn't quite fit in and did his own thing, because he was trying to get back to his hive mind. Getting back to the cats and hamsters. A hamster's a hamster, innit? So you got different breeds, but you'll go for the cheapest one. It's going to be dead soon anyway, in a relative sense, compared to you, and probably that's what Jesus thought as well. He probably thinks, I'm immortal, me, I couldn't give a shit which ones I go for, they're all going to be dead in 30 years' time. And maybe that's how Jesus the Planet Invader thought and what he did. Maybe he just gathered as many cheap and free pets to keep him company while he was going round rubbing lepers' toes and spitting in blind people's eyes or whatever he did. The Bible isn't the only book that references a tremendous 12. You've got alleged Nazi appeaser, Enid Blyton. Now, she came out and said something apparently according to her ex-husband's ex-wife. Many believe that the Nazis, they were mad for their alien stories, so maybe they'd clocked onto the importance of the number 12 in the media. So what if they used Enid Blyton to disrupt that? They'd still have 12 people of significance, but to disguise it so that scholars wouldn't notice, it's dead simple, isn't it? Famous 5 and the secret 7. 5 add 7 equals 12. Famous plus secret equals famous secret. The number 12 is a famous secret. And Enid Blyton may have known about the famous secret 12. All it needs is a comma somewhere. And the secret 7 abbreviated could easily be code for the SS, but FS could also stand for, I have to forgive me German accent, but Studentendeutsches Freikorps. And that was a terrorist cell operating in Czechoslovakia at the time. It could also stand for Freiwilliger Schützendienst, which was the precursor to the terrorist organisation I've just mentioned. But that name was dropped in 1938. Enid Blyton also allegedly spoke out about appeasing Hitler at a dinner party in the 1930s. So could this have been what she was referencing? Could she have just had a couple bit too much, a couple too many sherries, and she's just started letting all the secrets out? Was it supposed to be a series, but she stopped because she let the cat out of the bag a little bit too soon? Was she saying that because she was purposely including these subtle references to the Third Reich in her books in order to keep Hitler happy? We may never know. We do know that many people consider her books, though, to be racist and xenophobic. And you know who would have loved that? Hitler. Hitler would have fucking loved that. And I bet Goebbels and Mendele, they'd be big into it and all. Just as a side note, have you heard of the idea of the Mandela effect? The idea that we split into two different timelines upon a fictitious death of Nelson Mandela? Well, what if in another world you've got the Mendele effect? Or what if in a timeline where the Nazis won? Maybe. I can easily imagine a TV advert with Joseph Mendele sitting cross-legged in his Hugo Boss underwear, cradling a bottle of aftershave made from the tears and ejaculate of conjoined twins, surrounded by lamps made of skin. And the tagline for this abhorrent perfume made by the Nazis, the Mandela effect. I bet Uncle Joe used to read a bit of Enid Blyton to his subjects, at bedtime and that to the kids. I don't know if subjects would be the right word. He wasn't like the leader, was he? Victims, mate. Victims. Fucking hell. That'd be scary though. If you're getting tortured by someone, the idea of them working it in shifts, like good cop, bad cop, but the same person's both. So Mendel is good cop and bad cop. And bad cop, he comes in and peels the skin off you and makes a new fucking ceiling light. And then at night time, he comes in and reads you a bedtime story as good cop and gives you a little, tap on the thigh, maybe a sly little lamb shank under the bed sheets. Who knows? I don't know what Mendel was doing to kids. Can we safely assume that the Nazis were also raping kids? I think we can. They were pretty bad people. I think we can say that. I think we can say that Hitler, Goebbels, and Mendel were possibly paedophiles. I bet they were. Who's going to argue that? Who's going to say, oh, actually, that's a lie. That's not. Who's defending them?
This episode's brought to us by Fat Pete's Prints. That's Fat Pete's Prints. It's a little shop on Etsy where you can buy fridge magnets of eyeballs. You can buy fridge magnets of all different old women's faces and collect the nan, collect the gran, grab a granny. They come in all different types of grandma, all happy grandmas by the looks of things, but different types. There's other things on there. There's artistic black and white prints as well, and they're always adding more, whoever Fat Pete is. But thank you to Fat Pete's Prints for sponsoring the show. Anyway, I'll let you get back into the Majestic 12, mate. Well, before you do though, there's a link in the bottom of the description if you are interested in seeing what Fat Pete's got. So go and have a look at Fat Pete's Prints. And now let's get really deep into the number 12 for a little while, eh? Yeah.
Anyway, back to fucking Mendele. By day he's this he was this unhinged bloke with a syringe full of antifreeze, and at night he's this relaxed grandfather figure. Now I may have made that up, but that's a horror film that needs to be made either way. Oh, I've got this idea as well for a TV show as well, which is I think it's pretty funny. I think it's funny anyway. I love the idea that children's TV presenters are only happy because they're really forcing it out, because they're working from like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. No one is that happy at that time, so they've got to be forcing it. But what if it's because they live in constant fear for their lives? I love the idea that between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 a.m. they're locked up in some room tied to a radiator, like gagged and bound, and then they're wheeled out to entertain. And then as soon as they're finished, they're locked away again with a piece of bread and a bit of gruel. I think it'd be a comedy. I don't want to make it into maybe a scary comedy. I just think there's potential there. Could be historical too. Each series set in a different time period, so you could have it in the circus, you could have it on TV in the 80s, TV now, and you could even like make fun of famous paedophiles that have existed, and have them on, someone who looks like them, or heavily reference them without using the name, like having some old washed out Australian who seems to have just been old forever, messing about with a board, and he's just going round, or he's just rocking back and forth in a room going, can you tell who it is yet? Can you tell what it is yet? Can you tell what it is yet? Can you tell what it is yet? But anyway, I've rattled on for quite a long time there, for longer than what I thought I would. So let's get a tune on. I bet you've not heard a song with Bizarre on it for a while, let alone a new one. So this is by a guy called Go Bill P. It's alright, it's called Laugh. That was Laugh by Go Bill P with featuring Bizarre. Now what makes it even weirder is that there, by playing a song with Bizarre on it, that's a little reference in it to the number 12. Completely unintended. I just wanted to play the song because I liked it this time, but he was in D12, which was also a 12 that wasn't actually a 12. So that's worth noting, isn't it, really? Anyway, fuck me. Mrs. Blyton, she might have been enjoyed by the Nazis, but I doubt George Eastman was. Because he's reported to regularly have given donations to places like the Tuskegee University and other educational institutions which tended to have larger numbers of black students. And if you're thinking, fucking hell, where's he got that from? The Tuskegee experiment is this whole nasty thing. I'm going to go into that in a little bit in a minute. But the reason why it's important to say they had large numbers of black students is because the Tuskegee University experiment, or whatever it was called, I can't remember the top. But that was pretty much aimed at black people. And the Nazis would have hated him, though. The Nazis would have properly hated George Eastman. I imagine the ones that escaped through Operation Paperclip would have especially hated all of this help that George Eastman was giving. And could that be why he really died? Was his apparent suicide just a precursor to other notable suicides in more recent history? If there was some philanthropist helping out poor people and people that weren't white, that would have caused problems back then. Besides, they would definitely need George out of the way so that they could prepare the Tuskegee experiment that started in the same year as George Eastman's death, which seems really fucking suspect, do you not think? For those that don't know, the Tuskegee experiment was a clinical trial of sorts where a load of black people who had syphilis and told them, and the doctors or whatever you want to call these knobheads, they pretended they were treating them for the condition, whilst in reality they weren't. They didn't make any effort at all. They just recorded what happened to the people. Even when a treatment was later discovered, the victims involved in the experiment still weren't informed about the treatment. But 1932 is before Operation Paperclip, so it's almost like all around the Western world, rich, powerful people just experiment on their subjects, which is weird, isn't it? One of the reasons many people don't know about stuff is because of the way mainstream media consumes itself, constantly repeating tropes and stories, and that brings me back to the 12 true types of foxes. With thanks to American media, we do actually have 13 types of fox. Fox is a broadcasting network in America, and could it be that they called it Fox because of the significance of the number 12 and 13? Is it a cunning trick? Seems to be a little sly, and it could just be a coincidence, but not when you realise that Fox is responsible for The Simpsons. The Simpsons had that reference to the 13-month calendar too that I mentioned at the beginning, along with all that apparent future predictions that The Simpsons has become famous for now. Almost like all of life as we know it is predetermined, like it's planned. So what if it is all planned? Why do they have to have time travellers writing the show? Why can't they just be privy to the secret information about the plan for the Earth? And I've just noticed something as well. That number of days in the year of the International Fixed Calendar is 364, right? Well, if you add 3, 6, and 4 together, it's 13. It's pretty freaky, isn't it? Pretty weird. How has all this come about? Why is everything I'm talking about here all about number 12 and 13? How's that happened, innit? Like, that's mad. Is the answer to something very important the number 13? Are we all like living in a simulation and the answer's actually 13 and we just need to figure out now what the question is because we've forgotten the question? Or is the number 13 really important and that's why we're told it's unlucky so that we stay away from it, we purposely shun it away? A baker's dozen, that's 13. It's 13 in case one of them messes up. So there's a chance there to have 12 and one broken one. So was Jesus the one broken one? Was it a group of 13 and Judas was the one broken one? In the Majestic 13 is the 13 sentient beings from all different dimensions, but one broken one. So what if we're told it's unlucky in that? Because before whatever took control of the earth did take control, a dozen was considered to be 13. And that everyone counted up to 13. Like people did used to count up to 12 instead of 10. Before the decimal and coins as we know it now in the UK. Like for example, there was 12 pence in a shilling, and that's something that affects everyday life. But what if it's being misremembered due to an enforced Mandela effect, and it was actually 13 pence to a shilling, and that's why it's called a shilling, because you give them 12 and they'd still be asking for more. And a baker would have been a pivotal member of the local community, the greatest thing to happen to the village since sliced ham. Maybe the bakers took a stand to try and keep everyone remembering the number 13. There are a few ways that people have tried to subvert opinions of bakers. Like, I think, you've got the Great Fire of London, which could have started from a baker. It seems like it could have done. You've got the idea of a bun in the oven, the idea that bakers bring life. So that's positive and negative. And then you get weed smokers being referred to as baked, almost in a derogatory way. So it's hard to work out if bakers are good or evil. Maybe there is no good or evil, though. Maybe there's just bakers who do good stuff and bakers who do bad stuff. I've always thought it's weird that there's two brands of dog food, one called Bakers, one called Butchers. So that's always seems strange to me. Now, I don't know what references to the number 12 or 13 are associated with butchery, but if you were to view humans as meat, which I'm sure the Majestic 12 and the Majestic 13 do, then you'd notice that humans tend to have 12 ribs, and this is where the redaction of our science and history becomes very apparent. We have 12 pairs of ribs, but according to the Bible, God removed one from Adam in order to create Eve. So that means at some point it was common knowledge that humans must have had 13 pairs of ribs if they had one to spare and could still keep 12. This bit of genetic engineering allegedly happened in the paradise that was the Garden of Eden. And Many people believe you go there after you die. All throughout history, people seem to have believed in an afterlife, but also seem to have always had reference to what? The number 12. Although, in reality, it's always the number 13, mate. They're never referencing the number 12. Here's something from R.A. the Rugged Man's latest album. That was Gotta Be Dope by R.A. the Rugged Man, Afro and Jazzy Jeff off of the album All My Heroes Are Dead. Anyway, I promised you historic fake 12, so here we go. Let's start with Norse mythology. We've all heard of Odin. We know about Odin. He's like the big daddy of the Norse gods, and he's the boss. He's the big enchilada, the king conquer, the top god. Well, he had 12 sons. So that's pretty weird, isn't it? Odin plus 12 sons is 13. I mean, obviously not taking into account his concubines or his wives. It probably bumps the number up to somewhere maybe 20 or in the 20s. But number 13 there with Odin and his 12 sons. Don't know if he had any daughters. Maybe he had one daughter, and then that's still the number 13. That's 12 plus one other thing that's different. The daughter's different to the son. The sun god, speaking of sons, of Hinduism, has apparently got 12 separate names. Not quite the same, but still odd and worth noting. Now, you've got to get a bit creative with your use of the English language, but this sun god could be either a reimagining or the exact same mythological being as Ra, the Egyptian sun god. And if you think the sun god, that could easily be a mistranslation of the son of God, or vice versa, linking Jesus to it. That the previous mentioned 13 of Jesus and his disciples, the son of the ancient Greek god was this lad called Hercules, and Hercules had to undergo 12 labours, which I imagine are some form of trial. But within ancient Greek law, there was also 12 Titans and the 12 Olympians, but these are all Zeus's. So it's Zeus's 12 Titans, Zeus and the 12 Olympians, Hercules and his 12 labours. That's 12 plus 1, that's 13 people, 13 things of significance every time. Mental, innit? It's fucking mad, mate. The Chinese operate in a 12-year cycle, and that might seem like a bit of a reach, but I bet there's loads of mobile phones and house phones that are produced in China, and historically, phones have how many buttons, guys? 12. 0 to 9, star and hash. That's 12 buttons. Now, everyone knew the hashtag symbol as the hash symbol, but it got rebranded along the way and got called a hashtag. Now, could that be to get less people speaking about hash? Because hash can do stuff to your brain, make it connect things that aren't there, help to fix your brain itself. Obviously, it can break your brain, and I bet it could cause some form of damage to a cranial nerve. And do you know how many cranial nerves there are in the human body? 12, mate. 12 cranial nerves. But all these cranial nerves are useless without the brain itself, and that means 12 plus 1. 12 cranial nerves and the brain. Now, we can take this all apart even further, and I would argue that hash, like alcohol, can bring people together. It connects people. Phones literally connect people. But in the old days, they had 12 buttons, sure, but they weren't functioning on their own, were they? They needed an extra thing. They had the 12 buttons to make the call, but they need an operator to connect the lines, I think. And that's where the number 13 comes in, being involved in bringing people together. You've got the 12 buttons of the phone making up the phone, plus the operator, that's 13. What if all brains can be connected, and that's what the collective consciousness is? It's just figuring out what the 12 things are and then finding that 13th factor that could have fuck all to do with them, and then adding them all together in a mixing pot. Maybe none of this is real. There's a good chance I'm wrong about it all. I don't know if it's very likely, but I could be. And maybe there are only 12 people that exist in the world, and the 13th person is lost or dead, and they're searching for an artificial replacement. Maybe there's only, when I'm saying there's only 12 people, maybe there's only 12 people that are actually real and the rest of us aren't. We just believe we're real, like in that film, Extinction. Maybe that's what all this talk about transhumanism is about. If they can turn us all into cyborgs, as is predicted, then surely we're not real. If they can do that to us, if it's as easy as putting a microchip into us and then we're transhuman, we're a cyborg, we're part human, part man, that must mean that our bodies are already adapted to take on this microchip and use it. If that's all it's going to take to upgrade us, then surely we're already a computer of sorts. Maybe these microchips will disable all of the fake people and leave this real person, number 13, out in the open. Everyone will get these injections of this extra microchip and they'll all just drop dead or start screaming, explode, blast up into space, and then just one person, maybe Tigbiddy Dave, For all we know, he could just then be the guy that's just there looking round with his saggy diddies just dangling in the wind. You never know, do you? Perhaps the world is a lot larger than we know, though, and we're all in like a holding pen. Like they've narrowed it down to 7 billion people. Maybe they narrowed it down to like 5 billion people, but we kept breeding. So now they're like, oh, for fuck's sake, we're gonna need to pen them off again. Maybe that's so the real Dirty Dozen can find their leader. Maybe they've got the Majestic 12, but they need that 13th person so that it works and they can do what they need and they can actually do the job, like the 12 cranial nerves need a brain to be able to all function, to be able to do their job. Maybe they've accidentally trapped number 13 in the bullpen with us. Maybe they were trying to separate us out and they thought that number 13 was in the other bullpen. But he's not, he's actually, or she's actually trapped here. And that's where all these stories of prophets have come from throughout history. These 12 probably couldn't afford to risk living amongst us, so maybe they reside in the moon. Maybe that's what's actually in the moon. Maybe it's not a prison, maybe it's more like a boarding or a hotel, you know. And there's only actually 12 people as well. This is worth remembering this. There's only actually 12 people who've ever walked on the moon. And them 12 people wouldn't have been able to work on the moon without what? That other person, mate, on the other end of the line, telling him, you're doing a cracking job there. You're doing a good job, Neil. Great job. Don't worry about it, Buzz. You're doing well. I don't know what any of the others were called. I imagine the rest of them have probably got Russian names or Chinese names or something. I'm not going to be able to pronounce them anyway. But that guy back at Mission Control speak, he's the 13th guy. Maybe. Bit of a reach. Probably the biggest reach of the show. But there is actually only 12 people who've ever walked on the moon. Maybe there's 12 people trapped in the moon. Maybe the reason why 12 people have walked on the moon is because then these things that were on the moon have used their bodies to put their souls or their entities into to then control them. So maybe Neil Armstrong isn't actually Neil Armstrong anymore. He is through fingerprint and DNA, but really he's got the mind of a werewolf trapped inside him or something, or a mermaid. I don't know. I'm just trying to get you there. Another famous mythological 12 plus 1 is the story of King Arthur, because he had his 12 knights and he had access to magic. There's just like how Jesus had access to miracles. I think there's 12 stars as well on the EU flag. Don't quote me on that, but I think they are. And I'm betting if you used to do it in the right way with the right coloured pen, pressing just light enough, never taking your pen off the paper, I bet you could use them 12 stars on the flag to draw a larger 13th star. They're organised in a circle, but they're telling us to look for ourselves, to see the world as we want to see it, and recognise that the truth is the world is however you want it to be. The circle is a trick. I bet the vast majority of you haven't even tried to draw all the EU stars into a larger star on the EU flag. And why is that? Because we're told don't damage flags. And why are we told don't damage flags? Because they've all got hidden images in them. We'll never know. America, though, that's divisible by 12. Maybe not the flag, but America itself. Because the currency. So the states of America get divided into 12 different groups dependent on the federal district that they reside in. So that's 12 things making up one, so 12 and another thing to make the 13. I'm not sure if it is 12 plus 1 really, because it's just one thing made up of 12 things, but one thing made by 12 means there's 13 things altogether, I would assume, if you used to use nouns, for each of them. Say you've got, A to L or whatever the letters are. I think it's A to L. Yeah, A to L. Yeah. So say you've got 12 of them, but then you call that section of the alphabet the frunkadonks. So you've got the frunkadonk part of the alphabet. So you need all 12 of them pieces to make up the frunkadonk of the alphabet, don't you? But there's another weird 12 in America and all. All of their money is separated into 12 groups dependent on which Federal Reserve Bank it originally came from, and they're categorised into letters from A to L. It'd be interesting to see if a lot of the weird historical experiments happen in certain federal districts, though. That'd be something worth looking into. These different federal districts each be controlled by one of the so-called Majestic 12. Surmising that they have got fuck all to do with aliens and that they're all in fact just a group that are in charge. After all, this mythical 12, the Majestic 12, was supposedly born in America. So why wouldn't the Majestic 12s have a district each, and that would make up the 12 districts of America? And some of them are a bit more nasty and they do a bit different experiments. One of them might be nice every now and then and do good things. But if these experiments of old and whatever evil shit the Americans are currently conducting on their people are all happening in the same federal district, then why is that? Are there obvious cultural differences between the districts, like they've been given different variables in a science experiment? Could this be on purpose? Manufactured boundaries, each trapping in a certain type of person, be it through nature or nurture. For example, There's bound to be. It's not really an example, but I imagine there's predominantly white federal districts and predominantly black federal districts, and there's probably federal districts with amazing education systems and other federal districts with terrible education systems across the board. I bet there's some that are more densely populated than others as well. It is like an experiment if you look at it, but I've made all of that bit up. You'd have to go and look for that yourselves. What if it's all an experiment, mate? In an experiment, though, you'd want to keep some things controlled. For example, the food consumed or the chemicals being put into a body. Well, boys and girls, according to the Smithsonian magazine, there's actually only 12 types of crops throughout the world, and 3/4 of the world's population eat them. Like 3/4 of the world's population only eat from 12 crops. Now, that quarter would make for a nice control group. Possibly would even make for the percentage of people that aren't involved in the experiment, what normally gets referenced as the 1%, maybe. I wonder how close that 1% is, though, like as a group of people that isn't eating from these 12 types of crops. Is that 1% the predicted number of ideal earthlings as according to the Georgia Guidestones? Because that's a thing that's in America, isn't it? The Georgia Guidestones. Maybe that ties in with the Majestic 12 as well. Anyway, it's Joel Ortiz and King Crooked. It's off their album Hard. I'm Jack, the world around you, and you're listening to Paul.